Skinwalkers, shapeshifters, and strange creatures are being spotted all over the country. Strange pale white beings in Colorado, disfigured coyote-like creatures in the Southwest, bear men in the Adirondacks, and an old tale of goat skin. This episode will take you through 4 terrifying witness accounts that make us all wonder, is there truth to these terrifying shape-shifting beings? You won't want to miss this one. At 2 a.m. on August 24th, 2024, a 29-year-old behavior analyst named Jessie Clausen rolled out of her bed in her Denver apartment. Despite the early hour, she wasn't tired or groggy. In fact, she was wide awake and filled with excitement. Today was the day she and her hiking companion, 28-year-old graphic designer Camille Avarella, would finally tackle Long's Peak in the Rocky Mountains. Jessie had been planning this hike for weeks. At 14,000 feet, Long's Peak wasn't just any mountain. It was a serious challenge that would require significant prep and endurance. The trek was expected to take around 15 hours round trip, which is why they had decided to begin their journey at this uncomfortably early hour. Their goal was simple but ambitious: start in the dark, reach the summit by mid-morning, and make it back down before dusk, all in one day. And after grabbing her carefully packed gear, she met Camille outside her apartment. They loaded their equipment into her car and drove to the trailhead, both of them buzzing with anticipation about the adventure ahead. They'd been hiking together for a while now, but this would be their most challenging expedition yet. When they arrived at the trailhead, the mountain was just a massive shadow looming against the night sky. They strapped on their headlamps, adjusted their backpacks, and began their ascent. And for the next 7 hours, they steadily made their way up the mountain, navigating rocky terrain, steep inclines, and increasingly thin air as they climbed higher. By approximately 9 a.m., after 7 grueling hours of hiking, Jessie and Camille finally reached the summit of Long's Peak. They were exhausted but exhilarated, in what Jessie would later describe as full adrenaline mode. Standing at 14,000 feet, they could see for miles in every direction: mountain ranges, forests, and distant cities all spread out beneath them. It was a breathtaking view, and they immediately began taking photographs to capture the moment. After spending some time at the summit to rest and enjoy their achievement, they began their descent. As they made their way down the mountain, they continued taking photographs of the scenery. The mountain range was incredibly beautiful, and they wanted to document as much of it as possible. But as Jessie would later explain, they weren't really paying attention to their surroundings beyond the obvious scenic views. They were still riding the high of having reached the summit, which made them somewhat oblivious to the details of their environment. What Jessie and Camille didn't notice, but they couldn't have noticed, was that during their descent, something unusual was present on the mountainside. Something that would later defy explanation. As they snapped photo after photo of the pretty mountain range, they unknowingly captured an image of what appeared to be a lanky, gray creature clinging to the side of the crag. This entity, with its humanoid features but strange proportions, was approximately 20 feet tall with a grayish appearance. But in the moment, neither hiker saw anything out of the ordinary. Their eyes passed right over it, and they continued their journey down the mountain as if nothing had happened. After completing their trek and returning home, both of them were proud of their accomplishment, but understandably exhausted. They had successfully conquered Long's Peak in a single day, and just as they had planned. They uploaded their photos to their computers, but didn't immediately review them in detail. The photos would sit there, largely unexamined for several weeks, actually. Then, during a family gathering at Camille's parents' house, Jessie and Camille decided to share their adventure with her family. They connected a laptop to the plasma screen TV in the living room and began scrolling through the photos they had taken on their hike. As the group admired the stunning mountain vistas, someone noticed something unusual: an odd white coloration on the side of the crag in one of the photos. Curious, they decided to zoom in on this unusual feature to get a better look. As the image magnified on the screen, the shape became more distinct and increasingly disturbing. What had appeared as just a white blur from a distance was now clearly visible as something that shocked everyone in the room. They were looking at what appeared to be a tall, humanoid figure clinging to the side of the mountain. Camille's father was the first to break the silence. He exclaimed, "What the hell is that? That it's at least 20 feet or so." And the room erupted with confused questions. Camille immediately wondered if they should call the rangers to report what they had found, and everyone was asking the same question. What is it? Jessie would later describe herself as being shocked to the bone as she stared at the figure in the photograph. A figure that had been right there on the mountain with them, yet somehow completely invisible to their eyes at the time. As they continued to examine it, trying to make sense of what they were seeing, Camille suggested a rational explanation. It could just be a rock formation that happened to look like a figure from that particular angle. Well, days later, Jessie and Camille decided to share this with other hikers. They posted the pictures on a Facebook group specifically for Colorado hikers, hoping that someone might have seen something similar or could offer a plausible explanation. The response was overwhelming. Dozens of encounters in the group expressed being disturbed by the phenomenon and that it wasn't just simply a weird rock formation. Unfortunately, the identity of the strange creature photographed that day remains a mystery. And what's really fascinating about this case is that it's not the... Uh-oh. We have lost power, folks. Who is this?
I dwell in dead zones, but I still get unlimited talk and text on the nation's largest 5G network.
What? Who is this?
No stores, no pushy sales folk. Everything is done online. Switch in minutes with eSIM and keep your precious number.
Listen to me. I don't know who this is, but I'm tracing the call right now.
It would be a shame if your power were to never come back on. Or worse, your precious family.
I swear if you're behind any of this, I'm gonna...
Now stop. All you need to do is acknowledge the savings. Say it.
Fine. Mint lets you choose...
No. Look into the camera and say it.
Mint lets you choose 3, 6, or 12-month plans. Bulk buying for bigger savings. The 3-month intro plans start at $15 a month.
Yes. And the data. Choose 5, 15, 20, or unlimited, so you never overpay for data you don't feast on.
You also get free calling to Mexico, Canada, and the UK, and even shapeshifters roam internationally, I guess.
And a 10-gigabyte hotspot or unlimited for when the darkness swallows the Wi-Fi.
Okay. I did what you asked. Just please leave my family alone and turn my power back on. Please, I'm begging you.
Repeat after me. At the link below, new customers can get their premium wireless plans that start at $15 a month.
At the link below, new customers can get their premium wireless plans that start at $15 a month. Back in 2008, a 21-year-old man named Anthony Tooling was dating this girl who, honestly, wasn't really the nicest person. They had been together for a while, but there were all these issues that had been building up between them, and it wasn't hard to notice they were definitely heading toward a breaking point. In early spring of that year, they were driving through an area in rural New Mexico, pretty far away from any town or anything, which then again is pretty much like the entire state. and they got into a nasty fight. Anthony doesn't even remember exactly what started it, but it just kept escalating and escalating as they were driving. She was getting more and more angry, and he was saying things he probably shouldn't have said, and the entire situation was getting worse by the minute. Then, right around midnight, she just completely lost it. She pulled the car over on this empty desert road and forced Anthony to get out. He thought she was joking at first, but she was dead serious. She was screaming at him to get out of her car right now, and so he did. Anthony grabbed his phone from the cup holder and stepped out. But the second he did, she just drove off. And so he stood there for a moment watching her taillights vanish, thinking that maybe she'd turn around, but she was gone. The fear of being stranded out here in the middle of the night hadn't fully settled in on him yet. He didn't have a flashlight or anything, just his cell phone that he was using to light up the path in front of him. And you have to remember just how pitch black it was during this. I mean, there were no lights at all. The stars and moon barely provided any light. Anthony just figured that he was better off just walking in the direction that his girlfriend went, and he figured, you know what, she would eventually turn around and pick him up. Well, after walking for maybe 15 minutes, he started to hear something. It sounded like movement, like something was walking toward him from somewhere in the darkness. He stopped walking and just stood there, listening intently. And the second he stopped, whatever it was stopped too. And so he shined his phone light around trying to see what was out there, but the light wasn't strong enough to show much beyond a few feet in front of him. When he started walking again, he heard it too, moving again, getting closer and closer. Now at this point, he was really starting to freak out. He didn't know what was out there, but something was definitely following him. And then he just panicked. He started running down the road as fast as he could, and immediately he could hear something begin running after him. Whatever it was keeping pace, which then made him sprint as fast as he could. Because it was so pitch black, he couldn't see every step he was taking, and bam! His foot caught something and he tripped on the ground hard. He scraped his hands and knees on the asphalt, and the second he fell, the running sounds behind him just stopped. He began to scan his surroundings because now there was complete silence. There weren't even sounds of the night. He just lay there for a moment trying to catch his breath, listening intently for whatever or whoever this was out here in the middle of the night following him. After a few minutes had passed, he didn't hear anything and began to convince himself that all of this was just in his own head. Quickly, he scrambled to his feet, but struggled to get off the ground. He wasn't fully convinced he was alone, and again, he began to frantically shine his phone light in every direction possible, just trying to figure out who the heck was out here. Within just a few moments, he heard a sound that he had never heard in his life. It was this snarling kind of sound. It was somewhat like an animal, but it was different. The worst part about it was that it was just beyond where his light could reach. He began to feel every nerve in his body freeze and tense up, and the snarling began to get louder. And not sure what else to do, completely panicking at this point, he quickly pointed his phone directly at where the sound was coming from. Now, for the first time since all of this started, he finally saw the source of the noise, or at least partially. For those first few seconds, his brain had a really tough time registering what he was looking at because he couldn't really comprehend it. It resembled a coyote to an extent, but it was much uglier and looked disfigured. The most disturbing part was that it had this evil expression on its face. There was something seriously wrong with this animal. All of this happened in a matter of seconds. Out of reaction, he turned and began running as fast as he possibly could, and during that time, he could hear this thing running behind him. However, it wasn't trying to catch up to him. It was just trying to keep pace, at least for the first 5 seconds. Then he could hear it start to get closer. And folks, like a scene out of a movie, off in the distance, he sees headlights coming right over the horizon, and he began to run faster and faster, going harder than what he thought possible, and he began waving his hands and arms, screaming as loud as he could, and he was so hyper-fixated on getting help that he wasn't paying attention to what was running up behind him, and the fact that it was much closer to him than before. But for some reason, it never tried to grab him or touch him or attack him, and by the time the vehicle got closer, he realized it was his girlfriend who had indeed turned around and came back for him. She had barely even slowed down when he just ran to the passenger side, jumped in, and began screaming at her to drive. And he's telling her, "You have to drive now. There's someone out here who's trying to attack me." But instead of showing concern, she looked at him like he was crazy. She had this sneer on her face, mockingly asking if he was scared of the dark or something. But she could clearly see he was freaked out, very visibly distressed, but she didn't seem to care at all. And by now, he was just completely over all of it. He demanded that she drive, and just as he finished his sentence, they both turned their attention to a strange sound in front of her vehicle, just beyond the front of her headlights. She quickly looked back at him with this panicked expression, realizing that there was probably some truth to what he was telling her. Doing the fastest 180 he's ever seen in his life, she began going 80 to 90 miles an hour down the road, and to their luck, nothing seemed to be following them. At this point, she's now freaked out and starts demanding answers like he knows. He tried explaining it to her, however, she just immediately dismissed it altogether and explained that he was clearly imagining things. It was probably a person out there trying to rob him. Over the next 15 minutes, she began twisting the story and continuously insisting that he was making up all the details just to get her to feel guilty about leaving him out there, basically gaslighting him. Well, after this, he ended up not telling anybody about his experience because he was afraid they would think he was too crazy. It wasn't long after this that his relationship would completely fall apart. He would eventually share his experience online with others and is still adamant that it is one of the scariest experiences he's ever had. The worst part is, he's not exactly sure what he saw out there in the desert night, but that he's convinced whatever it was, that it was completely real and not just his imagination. In late summer of 2004, an 18-year-old man named Adam decided to go solo hiking in the Adirondack Mountains. Adam was relatively inexperienced in the outdoors, but wanted to prove his brothers wrong because they didn't think he could. Adam had planned out a basic 3-day trip where he would go a few miles off trail and just kind of rough it out for a little bit. And on the day of, Adam ensured that he had all the adequate food and water and most of the supplies he needed. He figured for just a 3-day trip, he wouldn't need much at all. Fast forward to him finally finding the perfect clearing to set up camp. He quickly set up his tent and established base camp. He realized that he forgot one crucial item: a sleeping bag. He did keep a large blanket in the back of his truck that he had hauled up with everything else, so he wasn't entirely screwed, but he felt defeated, understandably so. He wasn't sure if he should continue camping or if he should just simply call a friend and admit his mistake, but was just too embarrassed at the thought, knowing that he would probably never live it down. After spending all that time setting up camp, he just decided he was going to rough it out and do the 3 days as planned. Adam gathered up a bunch of leaves and piled them into his tent, and he figured if he stacked them high enough, it might be comfortable. Looking around, he was at least happy with the location that he'd picked. He was near a large lake with a beautiful view, and there was a nice breeze that made the warm day a little easier to handle. As he sat there looking out at the water, he thought that maybe meditation would help calm his nerves. So he found a perfect spot right by the lake, figuring it was the perfect place to meditate. He sat down, closed his eyes, and then opened them briefly to check his surroundings. Then closed them again and really started to focus. He was starting to get into a decent meditative state when he heard a loud crackling sound coming from the nearby woods. His eyes shot open and he saw a huge black bear. Immediately, he froze. He thought about running but knew that might just provoke the bear to chase him. Instead, he sat there hoping that if he stayed still, the bear would eventually lose interest and leave. He started praying to God for protection. There's just no way he was going to fight off a bear with his hands. But the bear didn't leave. Instead, it started making these strange noises like huffing and groaning and began walking directly toward Adam. It came within about 50 yards of him, behavior that he thought was really strange for a wild bear. All he could do was squeeze his eyes shut and remain as still as possible, waiting in terror for whatever was going to happen next. Suddenly, the bear stopped. Adam could sense it standing upright on its hind legs, but different than a bear usually does. Then, the bear started making these really strange chanting sounds. Adam heard a voice inside his head, not out loud, clearly saying, "It's not what you think it is." And at this point, he's very confused and terrified, and so he opened his eyes and the bear was gone. But standing in its place was this older Native American man, just still as a statue, wearing what appeared to be a large bear-looking headdress with animal skin draped over his whole body. The man looked over at Adam and just began chanting again, but this time louder. And during this entire thing, Adam just felt this overwhelming numbing sensation across his body, and everything around him kind of blurred and rippled, and he wanted nothing more than to jump and run away, but his body simply wouldn't let him. It's as if he was rooted to the spot, and at times his vision would go in and out of focus. This is the strangest thing. He knew he wasn't dreaming. I mean, this was really happening and fast. He had no idea what to do, but he felt like his life was in danger. Then, the same voice returned to his head with another message. You have to go. Adam suddenly had this kind of whiteout moment where he had vivid visions of himself walking off into the woods, like in third person, not from a point of view perspective. He doesn't remember moving or following any instructions. Even stranger is it felt like he was out of his body, just moving mechanically without thought or emotion, kind of like a puppet. When he regained full consciousness, he was inside of his tent. It wasn't evening anymore. It was morning, early morning, with a bright sunbeam streaming through the tent opening. Adam was lying inside a sleeping bag that he hadn't packed or owned, and so he immediately sat up, relieved to be alive and unharmed, wondering if he had somehow entered an alternate reality of some kind. Now, to say he was terrified by what happened is an understatement. Now he's like, you know what? Screw the camping trip. I'm getting out of here. He just quickly packed the tent up, grabbed his stuff, and bailed. He wasn't about to take any chances. Interestingly, the entire time he was taking down camp, he kept getting this strange sensation, like he was being watched, and would have to frequently look over his shoulder, expecting there to be somebody. But not only was there nobody around, but the woods were silent as well. Even though Adam wasn't experienced, he knew that this meant that there was a predator in the area. What's fascinating about this story is that there are a handful of strange and chilling Native American folklore all over the Adirondacks. In fact, stories about shapeshifters have been circulating with many different tribes all over the country for hundreds of years. There were even numerous stories in Native tradition about spirits that could transform between animal and human form, particularly bears. Some were protectors of sacred land, while others were tricksters or worse. This makes me wonder, why had it targeted him specifically? Was it because he was trespassing on sacred ground, or was it trying to teach him some kind of lesson? While we can't say for sure what it was that he experienced, something truly unexplainable happened to him that has forever changed his perspective on reality. The next story I'm going to share with you tells of an old tale told around the fire. It is believed by many tribes that there is dark and ancient magic associated with those that can shapeshift. But it doesn't clarify what the entity is, and in fact, it has a strange obsession with goat skin. Whether this story is just folklore or rooted in truth is left up to you to believe. Many years ago, not long after horses had first been introduced to the Navajo people, an elderly man named Hosteen lived with his wife in a traditional hogan on the edge of what is now the Navajo Nation. Like most Navajo families, they moved between seasonal properties based on the weather, following patterns their ancestors had established for generations, leaving his wife behind to finish preparing their summer home for the seasonal abandonment. When he finally returned, tired but satisfied with his work, he found their hogan empty. His wife was gone. Her rifle and her horse were missing too, but nothing else seemed disturbed or out of place. His wife had probably gone to visit a nearby friend. His instinct proved correct. When he went looking, he found her staying at their neighbor's house just a few miles away, but the story she told him about why she'd left their home chilled him to the bone. His wife explained that while he was gone, one of their goats had returned to the property, acting strangely. The goat stood there, completely fixated in one direction, like it was in some kind of trance. She tried to snap it out of this weird state by tapping it with a stick, but the moment she did this, the goat let out this terrible scream and dropped dead right on the spot. His wife thought maybe the goat had some kind of brain problem. Not wanting to waste usable parts from a perfectly good goat, she butchered it herself. She hung the goat's skin up to dry in the sun and placed the headless carcass in one of their wagons to deal with later. While finishing up her chores that day, she heard what sounded like rattling coming from outside. Initially, she thought it might be a rattlesnake preparing for fall, so she went to investigate. The goat skin she had hung up to dry was missing. Her first thought was that somebody was stealing from them, so she ran back to their hogan to get her rifle. When she came back outside with her gun, she noticed something dragging on the ground. It was the goat skin. She initially thought maybe an animal was taking it, so she followed the trail. But as she got closer, she realized with absolute horror that the skin was moving by itself. It was just gliding across the ground with no animal or person pulling it. In panic, she fired multiple shots at the skin, but despite being shot at, it kept moving toward the washes and the hilly terrain nearby. After seeing this, she was too terrified to stay at home alone, and that's why she had gone to the neighbors. Hostine knew they needed help, and not the ordinary kind. In Navajo culture, medicine men were the ones you turned to for these kind of unexplainable situations. They were spiritual leaders who provided prayers and guidance during troubling times, similar to priests in other religions. The next morning, Hostine sent his wife and some neighbors to find local medicine men. This took several days. Finally, they returned with an elderly medicine man named Bidzil and his 3 young assistants. The wife showed them where she had stopped following the moving skin, and after seeing the location, Bidzil and his assistants decided they needed to proceed alone. Hostine and his wife could not go with them. This was specialized work that required training and knowledge they did not possess. Instead, they were told to keep a bonfire going all night as a waypoint. So, late into that first night, one of Bidzil's assistants returned to the home. He looked exhausted and troubled, and he told them one of their horses had fallen into a ditch and was badly injured, so they had to shoot it. He asked to borrow another horse. Hostine gave him his fastest horse, and the assistant quickly rode back into the darkness. The next day came and went with no word from the medicine men. As night fell again, the couple built another bonfire. This time, the second assistant appeared, also asking for a horse. Again, Hostine provided one, their wagon horse. Later that same night, the third and final assistant showed up at their door. Like the others, he also needed a horse. At this point, Hostine was getting worried and asked about the goat skin. Was it found? What was happening out there? The assistant didn't really answer his questions. Hostine agreed to provide his last horse, but insisted on going along to check on his other horses. Reluctantly, the third assistant agreed. Hostine and the assistant rode together into the night, and after traveling for some time, they arrived at a ridge lit up by the full moon. As they got closer, Hostine could hear what sounded like a sweat lodge ceremony going on, rhythmic chanting and drumming. He noticed something strange in the distance below the ridge. In the moonlight, he saw what looked like a blurry white mass moving across the landscape. The thing wasn't giving off any light, but he could see it clearly in the moonlight. What really freaked him out was how it moved. It darted left, right, covering hundreds of feet in seconds, way faster than any animal or person could run, and it moved in no pattern at all, like it was playing or taunting something. He watched in terror as this thing entered and exited the washes below the cliff, moving with impossible speed. As dawn approached, the white mass suddenly vanished into one of the washes and never came back out. Hostine continued listening to the chanting. Suddenly, he heard heavy footsteps behind him. They sounded like his wife's horse. The footsteps got closer and closer, and without warning, he felt a strong hand grab his shoulder. Startled and terrified, he screamed and turned around, ready to defend himself. He found himself face to face with Bidzil, the old medicine man. He felt a heavy presence coming from the medicine man, something powerful and ancient. Bidzil looked at him with piercing eyes and asked why he was so far from home. Confused by this, Hostine explained that he'd come with one of the assistants and was told to watch the fire and keep the rocks hot. Bidzil looked concerned, and he told Hostine that they had found the skin and had been trying to chase it up into the washes to trap it between high sand walls. But during the first night, 2 of his assistants had died when the walls of a wash collapsed on them as they approached the skin. Bidzil and his last assistant had continued trying to trap the thing in the cliff sides. At one point, Bidzil couldn't climb to the top of a cliff, so he sent his assistant to watch from below while he went around looking for a trail up. This search took most of the day. Following the smell of dead animals, Bidzil had found scattered meat and blood which he thought belonged to their missing horses. And during the night, he too had heard the ceremony sounds but couldn't find where they were coming from. And so at dawn, he spotted Hosteen sitting near the edge of the cliff. Growing suspicious, Hosteen decided to check out the sweat lodge where he thought the ceremony was happening. What he found shocked him. The structure wasn't made of wood like it should have been, but of horse bones. And there, on the opposite side of the doorway, was the missing goat skin. Bidzil quickly grabbed the goat skin, and together they burned the bone lodge and everything in it to ashes. As they watched it burn, Hosteen asked how a simple goat skin could cause so much trouble. He said that another entity had come for the skin on the second night. At first, they thought it was Hosteen coming to find them when they heard heavy galloping. Bidzil just described seeing dark flashes moving in the moonlight, the same thing Hosteen had seen as a white blur. They had hunted this entity like you would hunt predators, trying to lure it into washes or caves. They even sacrificed one of their horses trying to trap it by collapsing the sand walls, but nothing worked. When they got back to Hosteen's house, his wife told them more disturbing news. The headless goat carcass she had put in one of their wagons was now missing too. Even stranger, there were no tracks where she had left it. It was like the carcass had vanished. And when the time came for the family's seasonal migration, they moved to their winter property as planned, but they never went back to their original home. Over time, sand dunes began to take over the abandoned property. The Hogan slowly fell apart over the years until it finally collapsed. No one ever rebuilt it or claimed the land. And because you guys made it this far into the episode, I want you to all comment below shifting sands. So that way I know who made it to the end and who didn't. And if you guys enjoy content like this, then what are you waiting for? Smack that like and subscribe button right now for more content just like this. As always, I love you all, keep an open mind, and I'll see you guys all in the very next episode.